Hello, everyone. Welcome to my new office, aka my laundry room and basement. I'm sure in these crazy times, everyone is working from a place that's not quite their normal working space. Thank you very much for taking time to join us. Here at Optigo, we thought we'd take this opportunity of everyone being at home to launch a series of webinars, training webinars. Hopefully, all of you can learn a little bit there. And most importantly, we are here to help with any question you have regarding networking, particularly networking for operational technology space. So for today's session, we are aiming for a 20-minute presentation with about 10 minutes of Q&A, questions and answers. And the objective today is really just to give everyone an overview of what networking is, with a little bit of on the side of nomenclatures, on the terms that are used often in the industry, and breaking it down into the layers. Again, these are terms that are very, very popular. What we're hoping at the end of today's presentation is that everyone walks away and have enough vocabulary that you can now talk to your IT counterparts or talk to your BAS counterparts. So your building automation, your operational technology counterparts, and also have a common language, and also know where are some of the places to be to watch out for when it comes to talking about networking. So let's go into it. And before we dive into the details, let me introduce you to Thomas McGee. He recently joined us. Thomas, say a few words.
Hi guys, as speakers there, I'm Thomas. Just recently joined Optigo here. I moved over from Ireland not too long ago, so I've kind of taken over the position of the kind of sales engineer, so slotting in between our general sales guys and our engineers. So I'll be looking after a lot of our support, our queries. So during this presentation, if you have any questions or afterwards, it will be recorded. So if you want to look back, have any questions, I'm sort of the person now will be looking to reach out and maybe you're the face that you'll be dealing with for the next while. So yeah. Thanks much.
Thank you, Tom. I guess I should introduce myself very quickly. Also, by the way, my name is Ping. I'm also with Optigo. I've been with Optigo since day one. Those who don't know me, find me on LinkedIn, connect, and let me know if you have any questions or suggestions on how we can improve the company or products or solutions and how we can better serve you. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, so the style we're going to do for these presentations, some people often say that we're going to wait till the end of the presentation for any questions and hold them. For our style now, we're going to do it is just ask away, stop us during the presentation if you have a question, and we'll just address questions as they go in there. Fill out. We have a survey at the end that you can ask. You can enter some comments if you have any ways that we can improve it, any areas you think that we could delve in deeper. Please just drop us any comments or feedback that you may have. And the session will be recorded, so we'll upload it onto YouTube there for you to view again if you do find that you want to go back and review stuff, or down the line if you found this useful, please do link it to someone else, send it on. Yep.
For your questions, if you do have any questions, just use the chat box in your webinar program. And we do have someone in the background. Her name is Natalie. She'll be there to field the questions. Some of the questions will be pushed to the end, and some of the questions will be pushed to us real time. So ask away, as Tom said, and use the chat box that is there to ask your questions.
Yep, so basically what is a network and what is the internet? Very brief overview of everything. So simply put, a network is just a load of devices connected together. So as you can see there, we've got our users, we've got smart lights, certain devices, maybe printers, cameras, we have IP phones and servers, just anything that you can use or connect together, them connected together makes a network. Now, when it comes to broadcasts and updates and being sent around, maybe you don't want anyone to be able to come in and access your stuff. So you connect everything with a switch, and then that will be your local area network, and that's separated from the rest of the internet by a router. So here we just have our switches connecting all our devices in each local area network on the left and the right here, and then they are separated by routers. As you can see, there's a few routers in between. It's not always just going to be separated by one or two. There could be many routers in between. This circle in the middle here almost symbolizes what the internet is as a whole. It could be data centers, DNS servers, whatever you're trying to access. So yeah, more or less it's just devices connected together and making sure that we don't have one wire having to go to each individual home run to each device. So how we link them together and how we have them being able to talk to one another. So that is what an internet, a network, on a very brief overview is. Now, for these presentations, we're trying to take advantage of the fact that obviously this is going to be a quiet period. A lot of people are working from home, and a lot of people might find that there's some tasks they previously would have been regularly doing that they can no longer do. So we're trying to take advantage of this, and we're going to run through just regular 2, 3 presentations a week, where we're going to delve in and just try to provide as much information and education on these topics as we possibly can, helping you guys to understand things better, troubleshoot better, and helping us be able to communicate, knowing the devices and knowing the inner workings of how everything works better. So our next one will be tomorrow, April 1st. We're going to have it at 10 a.m. PST. So please do join us for that. And that's when we're going to be delving into things a bit deeper. This one right now is just going to be a kind of brief overview. What is a network? What are the layers? And kind of some of the very common terms that you will probably have heard yourselves, or possibly not, but the more common ones that you find in network.
Thank you, Tom. So networking, as Tom said, is a fabric, an entity that connects users to machines, devices to devices, and so on. And how it does it is it moves what we call packets or frames from one device to another device, or from a user to another user. We love to use the example of the mail system, or now that's probably a little bit more relevant, the parcel system. If you go on Amazon, you order yourself toilet paper, what happens? So plainly put, they put in a box, and that's often called the payload. And then you have a to address, so sending it to Thomas in Vancouver, and from Amazon in Oregon, and that's your to and from. Now inside the box, very often you see this again. There's another box. Right? There's a box that's putting in the toilet paper, and then there's another box. So these are the layers that we talked about. So we're going to come back to this example of the parcel shipping system to explain how a network works. Just like in the mail system or the parcel shipping system, someone goes to pick it up and it brings it to the distribution center and goes to another distribution center. It goes to maybe a receptionist that signs it, and then it goes to another person that goes to another. That's, if you think about it, these are switches and routers and different layers through the network stack. Again, we'll use this example throughout this webinar series to explain, instead of using zeros and ones that we can't see in the networking, we're going to come back to thinking about a box of toilet paper from Amazon to Thomas. Okay, we're not going to dive into this detail here, but the first thing, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, is that what we're hoping to get out of this presentation is providing you vocabulary, nomenclature that you can use with your peers, particularly with your counterparts in IT. We often talk about the different layers. We talk about layer 2 and layer 3 and layer 7. Is it a layer 2 switch? Is it a layer 3 switch? Is it compatible with layer 7 applications and things like that? There's 2 big standard models. Most technology and networking folks would talk about the OSI layer. Okay. At the very bottom is your wires, is your fiber and Ethernet, all the way to the top of the application. That's your mail system, right? Your email system, I should say, or your web browser. But to simplify things, we're going to look at a TCP/IP model. It just simplifies things a little bit more. We have the network access, the internet layer, the transport layer, and the application layer. We'll go into that in just a little bit of detail. Again, just provide you that vocabulary. Often, first of all, when we talk about layer 2, we're talking about network access. Okay, layer 2 is connecting everything on one network. We'll talk about what the concept of one network is in a moment. And then the internet is often what we call about the layer 3. And that's interconnecting multiple subnets, right? Now, within this layer, it's often still fairly rudimentary, and it can be still localized. And once we get to transport, we're now getting into the software layers. And then the application is the final part. Tom and I, when we were practicing yesterday, we were using the example. First of all, then if we go back to the parcel system, The network access is your box, right? Are you using a truck to ship it? Are you using a train to ship it? Are you using um, a plane to ship it? That's your network access. It's how you're getting there. So fiber, wireless, Ethernet. If we look at building automation, it's your RS-45. Is it over Ethernet? Is it over wireless? The internet access, Tom puts it really well, is the route that you take. So when I go to work in the morning, or when the FedEx person is picking up that box of toilet paper and shipping it to Thomas, he may take a route that goes through, I-5, and then goes through this and goes through that. And then tomorrow, if Thomas orders another box of toilet paper, he will still get to Thomas, but he may take different routes. He may take different roads, right? So that's the internet layer. Your transport layer, that's your front door. Okay, so Amazon's leaving the warehouse, that's door bay 12 to Thomas's address 555 West Hastings. That's that front door, the UDP ports or TCP ports. Then the application is the people that are residing within those buildings. So if you think about networking, once a packet reaches the computer, inside the computer, there's only one port very often. There's only one Ethernet port. There's only one IP address. Then there's multiple UDP addresses or UDP ports, and then it goes to an application. So like a HTTP, HTTPS, and FTP access or DHCP, whatever the application is. Now it reaches that final destination, that final person. So again, if we talk about parcel, you know, Mr. Bob at Amazon picks up the box. It starts at the person layer, so it goes at the application layer, and then takes it out this front door, goes down to the transport layer, and then goes onto the road, that's the internet layer. It goes into a truck. It goes, that's a network access. It might now go to a plane. It stays on the network access, and then it goes to the road in front of our office. That's your internet layer. Goes to the front door. That's the transport layer, and then finally goes to Thomas. That's the application layer. We're putting some comparisons there to building automation. We're not going to go through the details, but it's again, it's not perfect, but gives you an idea of how the layers are broken out. There, today's age, everything is application to application. So you don't have to understand all of this. Again, it's for the vocabulary when we talk about layer 2 and layer 3 and layer 7 particularly. Layer 2 is your network. Layer 3 is internet IP addresses, your route that you're taking. Layer 4 will be your UDP ports. So in BACnet, when we talk about 47808, that's your transport layer, layer 4. And then the application, that's your BMS software. That's when you send a read property, it goes all the way down from application layer and then back across. Okay.
Yeah, so perfect, thank you. Yeah, so network overview. So we're gonna just, here's a very simplistic example of how a network or how things may work. So we have our layer 3 network, a layer 3 network. They're both separated by their firewalls or gateways from the internet, which is just a series of more routers and devices connected. So you have these separated from the internet by a gateway or firewall. So your router often may have a firewall placed in front of it, or it may have it may have some ACL, which is an access control list. It might have some availability to have something in there that also do a bit of filtering. That'll keep your own network protected. Now inside, you might notice that we have two layer 2 networks. Now, as we just mentioned, routers separate the layer 2 from the layer 3 networks. They can be used for that, but in recently now, you can have two networks by having subnets. So you can divide your network, your local area network, into a number of subnets, but you would need a router then to communicate between those two. Or more recently, we have the availability of layer 3 switches, which is kind of slightly getting into the more maybe advanced, and we'll delve into that at a later presentation. So we have our layer 2 subnets. We could have devices here if this was something maybe accounting, or you might have your sales that was maybe IT, OT here. We might have our lights, our lighting, and here we might have maybe water meters. We might have some things that we just don't want to, we want to keep separate, or we have some sensitive information we want to keep away from different people that are still using the same network, same connections and wires inside the local area network. There are also situations then where well, a very common situation that we all find ourselves in today is that we are here in our own local area network at home, and we're hoping to get into a computer that is connected to a device in an office or in our workplace. So that might be a serial connection. It might be something that unfortunately isn't available for you to remote in directly. So you might something you're connected into. So then you might use a VPN, which is a virtual private network. That's where we use the public network connections, but for all intensive user purposes, the user experience, it is almost like working on the private network. So these are all things that we will delve into at a later date, things we will explain further. But just as a brief overview of how a network works, what a network is, it is all your layer 2, your layer 3. You have your devices, everyone connected, who you're able to talk to in your local area network or your subnet, and that's the users you'd be generally working with on a normal day. You'll connect there. You will then jump up to your layer 3 if you want to move subnets, send a message to someone in a different subnet, or else if you're looking to go out to the internet altogether, remote in somewhere, that'll be using your layer 3.
I think the most important thing here to understand is that in pure networking, when we talk about a network or subnet, subnetwork, we're talking about layer 2. And the most important thing to understand about layer 2 is that layer 2 is what we call a broadcast domain. When a broadcast message is sent out, that could be as simple as a ping, right? Hey, ping, who is 192.168.1.1, it sends that message out to everyone on that subnet. So if we bring it back to the building automation space, and we look at BACnet, for example, BACnet is a very chatty protocol. When it sends out who is and devices reply with IAMs, typically these are broadcast messages. We'll talk about the difference between broadcast and unicast in a few sessions, but a broadcast message goes everywhere. It's like if I'm standing in an auditorium and there's 100 of us, and I'm speaking to all of you. My message, my voice is reaching all of you. If we had an auditorium where 100 of us were speaking at once, we would not be able to understand each other. And with that, that's why subnets need to be contained in a manageable size. Okay, because of that shouting, that broadcast approach to it. Once you reach a router, the primary responsibility of the router is to break that shout, to break that broadcast. A router will decide whether or not a broadcast will be passed on. We'll talk about that in a few sessions again. But when you look at, okay, well, 192.168.10 dot whatever, when we say the whatever, that's your subnet. And your subnet can contain 255 devices in this case. And that's a manageable size, because if I send out a one who is, a maximum 254 devices reply. That's not too bad. But if we make a subnet really, really big, if we connected all our office in 1,000-person office, and one ARP goes out, one ping goes out, 999 computers reply, and it can flood the network, but also it can cause every device to have to process every shout, every broadcast message. So I think that's the most important thing here to understand. That's why layer 2 and layer 3 networks exist. Layer 2, very, very easy to use. It's a broadcast domain. It's one place where broadcast reaches. You want to keep it to a containable size, a manageable size, and then use routers, layer 3 switches, to interconnect these layer 2 networks. Okay, this basically just summarizes what we talked about. We mentioned a lot of different terms, so let's go through the terms. One is a switch. Typically, a switch, all it is takes traffic from one port to another port. Typically, when we say a switch, it's a layer 2 switch. It's something you can go to Best Buy and buy fairly easily. I'm going to skip the next line and we'll come back to it. Typically, when we say a router, really the right terminology for it would be a gateway. A gateway acts as a rudimentary firewall, and it separates the public world from the private world. It translates addresses from the public space to the private space for many reasons. We'll go into that in a few sessions. But typically when we say a router, hey, can you get me a router? That's typically a gateway. Now let's go back to layer 3 switches. If you look at the terminologies precisely, a router is actually what we call a layer 3 switch. A router is what Thomas and I were talking about, where it's connecting two layer 2 subnets. But because in our world, we've been so accustomed to use the word router to signify a gateway, we strongly recommend that when you refer to a device that routes between two subnets, to refer that to a layer 3 switch. Now,
Yeah,
a
it is.
router, a gateway, right, Tom?
Oh, yeah, no, I was just going to say, most definitely, yeah, it does, yeah, it just kind of, I'd say a lot of engineers are at fault for more falling into the slang almost of the networking world, and that can, some words can almost be misconstrued or they're not technically correct. But yeah, no, we have found that with more enterprise solutions, or even with as the networks get larger, have more devices on them, you can find that you can take some of the pressure off the routers or some of the computational need off the routers by having a layer 3 switch, which allows for different devices on different VLANs to communicate with one another without requiring the router to get involved.
Yeah. Now, having said that, typically in operational technology, layer 3 switches are not really necessary. And again, we'll talk about that another time. But again, just for nomenclature, when you talk about networks, refer to switches. These are layer 2 switches. Refer to layer 3 switches. These are devices that route between two subnets. And then refer to routers as that thing that separates your private network from the world. Let's keep going. Wireless access point is different from a wireless router. At home, what I'm connected to right now is a wireless router. Thomas is probably connected to a wireless router. When you go to Best Buy and you buy a wireless router, it is a wireless gateway. It separates two networks. When you go and look at enterprise grade wireless networks, they use what we call wireless access points. Wireless access points are really just a translation from the Ethernet side or Cat5 side to wireless. It doesn't translate the address. It doesn't block anything. It is in some way, we shouldn't use that term, but for explanation's sake, it's a switch with wireless ports instead of networks. So a
You're
WAP,
avoiding saying wireless switch, but
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, it is a switch with wireless connections there. So yeah, exactly.
correct. So if you're looking at specification and talks about wireless access points, these are not the same as buying a low-end wireless router from Best Buy. Firewall, very, very important today. Again, we will talk about cybersecurity as one of the most important topic in our world today. A firewall filters traffic. Okay, and firewalls are extremely advanced. Some of them use machine learning to do it, but in the end, it's filtering traffic to make sure that the traffic you want gets through and the traffic you don't want gets blocked. And how do you do that? That's a whole science behind it. And last but not least, VPN. A VPN, it basically connects two places through an untrusted medium. Okay, it typically does that through proper encryption and proper authentication. And before I leave you here, one big advice here is if you need access to a private network, do not put a hole in the firewall. Instead, use VPN. Putting a hole in the firewall means that anyone who can find that hole will be able to leverage that hole. Okay, so a DMZ, for example, that's a hole in the firewall. Whereas in a VPN, requires proper authentication, login to get access, and then it gets encrypted to get in. Again, we will talk about all of these in more details in upcoming sessions. Thank you, everyone. Stay home, be safe, take care of one another. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Be safe now. Yep. See you soon.